Okay, so welcome everyone to the Undergraduate Research Education Series. Welcome back if you've been to any of our events before, watched a video before. You're probably familiar with my face, so I'm Shiver. I work in the Office of Undergraduate Research. And I'm going to start us off with our land acknowledgement, and then our piece of housekeeping about attendance and how you can make sure you get that all covered. And then we will hand it over to Dr. Yoon with all of the expertise and brilliance that you all are here to see. Okay, so the American Indian Resource Center leads the way for me to acknowledge that the land that the University of Utah resides on has always been on Indigenous lands, specifically on the lands of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah is located in Salt Lake City. If you are logging in or you're watching this video from another place, I encourage you to think about and look into the Indigenous peoples of whatever land you're currently on. It's imperative that we acknowledge the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. And through this land acknowledgement, I want to express my personal gratitude and appreciation for their persevering to protect this land for future generations. The erasure of this relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands is an insidious form of ongoing colonization, and we need to build our mindfulness around this and of important Indigenous protocols. And in my opinion, one of the absolutely crucial first steps to respecting Indigenous peoples is to give the land back. The piece of housekeeping for attendance. So if you are logged in to this call on Zoom in real time right now, your attendance is totally taken care of. Your login, your registration counts for that. If you are watching this video later and you would like that video to count for your UROP attendance or some other attendance requirement for the education series, please go to the education series page where you found the link to this video and fill out that evaluation form that's linked at the top with your unit. That's the only way that I can know that you watched the video. So please do that so that we can give you the appropriate credit for what you've done. I am now going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Dr. Yoon.
Thank you, Shiver. And I'm so sorry. I've been saying your name wrong in my head, and to you. Thank you. One moment, please. Okay. Let's see if this works for me this way. Yay, I can still see y'all and I can see the chat. This is lovely. Okay. Welcome. It's so great to see you. Names and some photos on my little Zoom screen. For those of you who are online, thanks so much for, later, thanks so much for checking out the video. My name is Irene Yoon. I am an associate professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy, and that is in the College of Education here on campus at the University of Utah. The courses that I usually teach tend to be in master's and doctoral programs. And a lot of the classes that I teach relate to qualitative research methods, instructional leadership. So how do school and district leaders support teachers to be the best teachers they can be and to provide equitable learning experiences for students. And then I also teach a lot about educational equity and social change. So how can people be leaders in their field from whatever position they're in as educators for social justice. So I was thinking that because there's not too many of us, maybe if you could type into the chat a little bit about who you are and what your, and then we'll go into some of the principles, like what are some of your guiding things to think about as you figure out whom to approach for your reference letter, because it's not always going to be, I mean, it's most likely going to be your direct supervisor or mentor, but it's not necessarily. And so I just wanted to give you some pointers for how to think through that. And then a few tips about the actual ask, and then some time for question and answers, or we can practice if you'd like, or if you have a situation that's a little trickier, then you're welcome to ask about that. Thank you, everyone. If you could type in also, what's your major or research field? Margot, Tyler, Will, Zach, Husaib, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Please feel free to correct my pronunciation if you want to unmute yourself at some point. If you want to share your major and your research field. And for those of you who are brave to unmute, you're welcome to also share a little bit about who was your favorite teacher or mentor when you were growing up. And that's not only from schools. There's so many of you who haven't introduced yourselves. Will's graduating this semester. Congratulations, in philosophy and environmental studies with a minor in creative writing. Whitley, thank you so much for, Tyler, sorry. Your major is BME. Your research is in cardiovascular hypertrophy. Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. Anyway, I have personal connections to that interest. Do you mind explaining what BME is, spelling that out? Is that biomed engineering? Husaib is a freshman. Welcome, first year students. Majoring in biochem. Zach is studying computer science. Oh, shout out to Mark Daniels at Weber High. Margaret's majoring in geophysics with a minor in math. Your research project is glaciology based. Oh, wow. I was a double major in math until I got sick and had to take time off and didn't have time to finish all the courses. So I only had a single major instead of a double major, but I have a spot in my heart for math. Hi, Ronnie. You are an undergraduate finance major. Wonderful. Maggie is a bio major, and your favorite mentor was your high school health sciences teacher. That's awesome. I feel like health doesn't often get shout outs in these situations, but that's so funny because my friend from high school and I were talking a few months ago about our high school health teacher and how awesome she was. Well, I love knowing a little bit about people in the room, even if it's a Zoom room. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your interests and where on campus you tend to be. I also appreciate hearing about your favorite mentors and teachers. I think I had two. Mine was my second grade teacher, and one was a high school history teacher. And then also, I was super influenced by my violin teacher growing up. And my dog is actually named after her mom. It's a long story. Okay, so I'm guessing that you're all asking for reference letters in the future or now, and feel free to use the chat as I talk if you have things that you'd like to ask a clarifying question about. So when you're thinking about asking someone, probably a faculty member, for a reference letter, you want to think about some of the norms of the field that you're entering, and you can ask them what that is. Like you can ask a mentor, like, who might be the best person to ask for a reference letter? This is my goal. This is the kind of stuff that I'm going to want them to be able to write about or emphasize. And then from that, you can ask, like, what, is it really important that I should have someone from work? Because a lot of times you might ask for more than one reference at a time. Is it really important that I have someone from my major write one of the letters, right? So those are things you can ask of a faculty member. When you think about whom you want to serve as your references. You also want to think about what type of goal it is, right? And so that goes along with the norms of the field. If you're applying for a job after graduation or for maybe an internship, then you probably want to have someone who not only talks about your academic skills, but also has worked with you, maybe supervised you on a campus job, or usually you want to make sure that the person is in like as professional a field as possible. So if you have a job off campus that is doing hourly work, but your internship is for something related to your major or your career, that may not be the best fit for a person to ask. So you want someone who can speak to the idea that you have skills relevant to what you're applying for. For graduate school, it really helps if sometimes graduate school, you're applying a couple years after you've graduated. And so you may not have kept in very close touch with the person. And that's okay. Usually if you're applying to graduate school, you want most or all of your letters to be from faculty members, like from academic institutions, because they're really going to speak to your potential as a student and a scholar, right? And if you are asking for a scholarship application, you should really try to find someone who is from your major, and it has to be someone you've taken courses with. And it really helps if it was in a small class so that they know you personally. I know that in some majors that's harder than in others. So if there is an instructor who maybe you met with in office hours, or showed interest in your final paper project, those things are ways to pick someone, even if you may have been in a bigger class, right? As I was saying that, I thought of one other thing, and it will come back to me. I apologize. It's Friday. Usually my brain is pretty fried at this point. So if I think of it, I'll come right back to it. And then another thing you want to think about is how good a letter can the person write for you, right? So you want to make sure, you want to think about who are the people you've worked the closest with. You want to think about how recently you've talked to them, whether that is personally or actually having worked or studied with them. And you want to think about how warm or positive the relationship was. Now, there's a couple of things that are tricky about this, right? The reason why you want to think about how recently you've spoken to them or how closely you worked with them and how positive the relationship was is because you want them to be able to give detail and have depth in the letter, and you want it to be really strong. I've read so many letters where the person wrote a totally fine perfunctory letter that didn't tell me really anything about the applicant, right? So another thing that sometimes happens is sometimes someone sends in a letter from their direct supervisor or mentor, but that person may not really believe in them. And so the letter is pretty short. And again, perfunctory, like it's just saying, basically, I am willing to serve as a reference for this person. I worked for them. And then you also want to think about people who are going to write things of substance about you. So I'm not really sure how to say this. So I'm just going to not sort of beat around the bushes. Basically, I've seen a lot of letters, particularly about women, where the recommender is emphasizing how friendly they are, how cheerful they are, how easy they are to work with, because they really get along with everybody. And those are very like gendered things that don't necessarily pertain to your talents or your skills and your interests. And so, or your commitment to the particular pathway that you're applying for. So you want someone who, you know, like is not just going to write about you being nice. So you want to pick people who you trust to have something of substance to say. Now, the thing is that you can actually support a person in coming up with substance to say. So that's the next thing we're going to talk about. Oh, really quickly though, about the whole thing with like the relationship and how recently you worked with them or talked with them. This is not the same for some people as it is for others, right? Some people are super shy. Some people have been in a major that's just gigantic and so has huge courses. Some people are autistic, and so social like interaction may seem stilted or feel a little bit awkward sometimes. And so there's not, if you find that you are worried about whether or not someone quote unquote likes you, I would say it's probably not the case that they don't like you. It's totally fine to go up to someone and say like, hey, we didn't work that closely, but I was really passionate about your class. Or I often think about that final paper that I did and it's turned out to be so relevant for like the rest of my major, right? So there's ways to show your connection to the person or to the content, even if you didn't necessarily always have the best like one-on-one contact with them or like the most frequent one-on-one contact with them. And we can certainly talk about that afterwards. Okay, so when you're making the ask, there are a couple things that you want to make sure to put in, right? So you want to say, dear so-and-so, and you want to use their title if you can. And I'm guessing that like this is assuming that the ask is coming in the form of an email. You may also be asking them in person, and if that's the case, the same content applies. You just say it to them as a person. And you want to approach them using their title if it's been a while, or if you don't have like a close relationship with them where they've told you to call them by their first name. Think of it as a formal letter, even if it is an email. And if it's been a while, like a couple years that you're applying for grad school later, you can do a quick reminder of how you knew someone. Like, I took this class with you in this year. And then tell them why you want to reach out to this person specifically. I'm writing to you because I really appreciated the assignments in your class, that they were field-based, right? I really feel like I became a better writer in your class, and I appreciated all of your feedback. So you want to tell them a little bit about why it is, that you've picked this person to ask for a reference letter. You want to tell them directly what's the goal that you're, I'm writing to ask if you would be willing and available to write a reference letter for me for this scholarship that I'm applying for. I'm going for this scholarship or this fellowship because, like for example, like a Fulbright or something, because I became really passionate about research in this area and I want to go back to my home country to follow up with it, right? You want to say, I'm asking you because, and this is sort of related to why you're asking this person in particular. I was hoping you could write about or speak to these relevant skills or products that you did in the class, right? So I was hoping you could speak to my writing, or I was hoping you could speak to the research project that we did together. I'm hoping that you could speak to my professionalism in the lab. All of those things are, you can basically tell them what it is that you are hoping they could write about. And sometimes people may even ask you to draft a letter, which is a little bit funny. But what it helps the letter writer do or understand is what it is that you wanted them to say about you. Because when you're writing for, like when you're applying for these things, a lot of them are going to be very competitive. And so you want to think about making sure that the letter writer wants to make sure that they're saying everything that you hoped they could speak to. So that's why they might ask you for a draft of a letter, and they'll probably, rework it. They'll want to know specific content, and they'll want to see your CV or your resume so that they can, get a broader picture of how what they know of you fits into other things that you've done, other courses that you've taken, or maybe other internships or research opportunities you've been part of. And when you're, acknowledge that it's going to take the person time to write this letter. That they're busy. Say, I know that you're busy. This is a time of year when everybody's looking for reference letters, so I appreciate it. Share a little bit of appreciation for what you learned from them. And then, if you were close enough and you haven't seen them in a couple years, you can say like, how I hope that such and such research project that I worked on with you has continued successfully, or, looking forward to learning about what papers have come out from that project we worked on, things like that. Okay. I remembered the thing I was going to say, which is that when you are thinking about whom to ask for a reference, it also helps to think about the status of the person in the field. So if you're applying for graduate school or some kind of scholarship or fellowship, like a national or international award, especially, it's best if your reference letter comes from like a more established faculty member. For some graduate programs and for a lot of jobs and stuff, it matters more how well a person knows you. But for some of like the bigger national things that you might be going for after graduation, or maybe during graduate school, you might be applying for some kind of research fellowship. It usually helps to think also about the status of the person. So how well known are they going to be in your field to someone who might be reading or reviewing the applications? So that's that last point. Okay. So that's really my spiel. This is it. So I'm happy to, at this point, take any questions from you, or if you have a scenario that you want to sort of walk through, I'm happy to do that with you. If you are currently working with someone who, like, I don't know, you're not super, like, you don't super love each other, whom you might ask instead. So you're welcome to put that in the chat, or to be brave and unmute. It's up to you.
We have an excellent question in the chat. When is the right time to bring up a letter of recommendation?
Oh, thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Shiver. So you want to give them plenty of time. So once you've really confirmed that you are definitely going to apply for something is when you should ask. And so in your letter, one thing I didn't put in this last slide about the content of what to put in the ask, you should also let people know when the letter is going to be due and what is going to be expected of them. For some people, it's just putting your name into a form. For some applications. For other applications, it's going to require an actual letter. And especially in those cases, you want to give a little extra time for people. And you want to say, like, if there's any way or any materials that I can give you to support your writing the letter, then please let me know. I'm happy to share anything. So sometimes I've asked to see, like, what writing samples are you sending in with the application, or what does your cover letter say? Because then I can make sure that I'm supporting the points that you're making about yourself. So I would say no less than 2 weeks. That is cutting it really close. It's best if you can do a month or more ahead of time. In part, I say that because many of these things that you're applying for, like graduate school and scholarships and such, they have extensive applications. And if you're asking at the last minute, it might also suggest that your application has been thrown together at the last minute, and that's not always the best impression you want to put forward. So.
Can I follow up on that? I've heard some faculty mention before that they're comfortable with students asking for a letter of recommendation really early. Like, let's say I've just taken a class with you and I'm not going to graduate for 2 more years, but I know that this class went well. I really, we vibed. Your content was really helpful to me. Could I ask you at the end of that semester and say, I know that I will be applying to med school or grad school. Could you write like a base for a letter of recommendation and hold on to it for me?
Oh, I've never been asked for a base letter of recommendation, but I have been asked at the end, like, would you be willing to be a reference in the future? And that's totally fine. And I like that because it like sort of affirms to me that you also got out of the class what I thought you were getting out of the class. So it's also nice feedback as a faculty member or instructor that I wasn't just like making it up in my head. And I think in that situation or in that case, it's also more likely that the person will remember you because you like sort of took the time to go up and say, hey, I liked this enough that I know I'm going to be coming back, or will be in touch. So, and you can keep in touch with your faculty members too. So if it's like, oh, a year later and you love their class so much that you joined the major, just tell them it's fine. Or, sometimes students will write to me out of the blue, and it not only reminds me that they're there, but it's also just like a really nice, warm fuzzy feeling that is, instructors are people, and it's nice to know when what we're working hard to do ends up being worthwhile to the students. And likewise, I do that too. I keep in touch with students afterwards and I'll be like, hey, I read this news article. It made me think of that paper you wrote in my class. And so those are the kinds of like really casual interactions that can keep your relationship going with someone, even after you take a class with them. And it can also potentially lead to, like, down the road, if you take a class with someone when you're in your second year of coursework, maybe in your third or fourth or fifth year of coursework, and you apply for UROP or whatever, then it may be that they think of you as someone to reach out to, like, hey, I want to reach out to this person and maybe work with them on a project. Right? So those are some like little ways to keep in touch with people. Students send me news articles or book titles all the time. They're like, hey, this made me think of your class. Have you read this? Things like that.
I'll ask another question just to keep things going.
Sure.
We've also often had students ask, and I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe some more guidance if they feel like they don't have anyone to ask, right? So they're going to apply, let's just say, to med school, and those requirements for letters of recommendation are pretty specific, and you've got to have, 2 from science courses and 1 from this other thing. And they feel like, I really don't have people from these specific areas that I can ask. What do they do then? How do they, I don't know, approach that situation or build a relationship real fast so they can get a letter that they need?
So I have had this happen where it's like, oh, that's interesting that you're asking me for the letter, because like I didn't feel that I was really someone that person felt that they knew well enough for a reference letter. But I think if you it's part of like explaining why you asked this person, right? So I know that you may not remember who I am because it was a big class. You can say that out loud. That's fine. You can say, I really appreciated your teaching style and the way that you brought in all of these, opportunities for us to ask questions, even though it was a big class. So if you let them know that you remember specific things about them, you can say, you can also offer, when you say, like, if there's anything that I can share to support your writing the letter, you can also maybe like remind them, like, I got an A- in your class. I'm happy to send the final paper that I wrote for you if you don't still have it, just to jog your memory. Or that's where, you can say I've attached my resume. And you can also say, like, if they've been recommended by someone, like I spoke to Professor so-and-so, and they recommended that I speak to someone who has taught me in this X course or content area, right? So chances are people will be happy to write for you. They know that this is a thing and it's necessary, and everybody needs letters. So there's ways to ask politely, and then you can also give them some material, like, I believe that I've really developed this set of skills and they really started in your class. Those are things that you can sort of feed them as in order to write the letter so that they can write you a good one.
How would you navigate a situation where a student works primarily with a grad student in their lab or their research, maybe on a studio-based project, and maybe they didn't have the most access to or relationship with the faculty member, but letters of recommendation in academia, hierarchical, build on the status.
Right.
So how would you suggest a student navigate having a strong relationship with just the grad student? Or
that has happened too. Great question, Shiver. So one thing that I would say is to explain, like, that so sometimes I'll write, in the past I would write back and say, hey, I was a grad student when I taught you in this class. I may not be the best name to put forward, is that's like, if you don't have others that you want to ask, then that's okay. And what you can do is say, I know that, like, people always say to ask, someone with a little more status, but I really feel like you'd be able to write the most specific letter. Another thing you can ask is, would you be willing to co-write it with someone? So, like, maybe the graduate student or instructor can write the letter and have the faculty supervisor sign off with them on it, right? So those are things that you can do to sort of get around that. Another thing you can do is to say, hey, I have these two big names. They're full professors, and I've worked with them a long time, or I don't really know them particularly well, so I want to sort of round it out with someone who did the direct work with me. And that's also another good strategy, because you want people who will show different sides of what you've accomplished, and what you can do.
And can I just offer a comment of support for that joint letter writing thing? I know that it sort of sounds awkward, but as a staff member, right, and just a graduate student, our undergraduate research leaders will ask me for a letter of recommendation regularly because I'm their direct supervisor. But I co-write those with Dr. Fukushima because her name is much more important than mine. So we collaborate in exactly the way that you've just said, and it's not awkward at all for either of us. I am never insulted when the leaders are like, but no one knows who you are. I'm like, that's right. Yeah. So I'll work with Dr. Fukushima on that. So
yeah. And I've done that too, where like the person who I work the most with was associate director, and I wanted to, and like it was probably a good idea to get a letter from the director, right? But I didn't work with them that much. So same thing. Another thing is similar to the question about when is the right time to bring it up. I mentioned also to let them know what's going to be required of them and when it's due. The thing also is to, it has to do with timing. Oh my gosh, I forgot it already again. I am so sorry. I've been struggling with migraines, and my brain is not as sharp as I like it to be. Anyway, let's move on. And again, I'll remember it later. I'm becoming like this stereotypical absent-minded professor, and I'm trying to embrace it, but we'll see.
I mean, people are talking about how over the course of the pandemic, everyone has become a little bit more absent-minded. So you're certainly not alone in that.
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Shiver. I do feel like I thought it was like a new thing, but apparently some of my students have been like, oh, Dr. Yoon, you've always been that way. Okay.
I have a question.
Hi.
Hi, this is Ronnie. I just wanted to follow up with my first question. Like, how would you, like, let's say you found a person to write you a letter, and they agreed and they said they were going to do it, but let's say they keep forgetting because they're busy, and you have a timeline due. So how do you like politely ask them, like, hey, I know you're really busy, but I do have this timeline coming up. So
what I do is I say, hey, I know you're really busy. Is it okay if I send you a reminder? Or would you mind if I sent you a reminder like 2 weeks ahead of time? Or that's another reason why hey, I know you're really busy, or you're probably writing a lot of these letters. And so what do you prefer? Do you prefer that and this is usually a second communication, like after they've agreed to write you a letter, you can say, what is your preference? Like, do you just want some materials to support what you can put in into the letter, or would you prefer that I draft up the letter? Like, how do you do it? How would you like to do it, right? So you can offer those things, because that totally happens. So smart of you to ask that question, Ronnie.
thank you.
I would say in anything that with applications, it's better to ask than not to ask. So even if it makes you feel awkward, if you want to know, like if you want to talk strategy, ask someone if you can talk to them about the best strategy for things. I've seen too many applications where it was obvious that the person had great talent but had not received the best mentoring or advice. And it's really a shame when the letters aren't strong, or when the writing samples are not the best choices, or when the personal statement isn't really well argued, or needs to be proofread or whatever. So to the extent possible, I'm guessing that most of you are pretty committed to your studies, and you're probably pretty savvy because you've been engaged with UROP or other research opportunities. But it's really smart to ask people to read your stuff with you or for you, and to ask them, to say, hey, I know it's like 4 months away, but I'm starting to work on this application, and is it okay if we meet for 15 minutes to just talk strategy? And that's something that most people will be more than happy to do. And especially if it's because it only takes 10 or 15 minutes to chat with someone and figure out what's the best approach, or what do you really want to emphasize, to make sure to emphasize in your cover letter or your personal statement, things like that. And often if you bring them a cover letter or a resume or a personal statement or something to the meeting, they can scan it right then and there and give you some quick feedback. Say, oh, this is really great. You need to make sure to mention XYZ part of your resume as well. That kind of feedback is really helpful, and it's really quick. So it also lets them know that you're serious, so they feel a little bit better about writing your letter. It also, go ahead, Ronnie. Yes, please.
I think you probably talked about this early on, but let's say you have a professor or a manager that is a great fit to write a letter of rec for you. How do you start that not conversation but relationship with them, so that way down the line you can use this person to write a letter for you?
Okay. So do you have a specific example, like you've taken a class with them, or you're working in their lab, or?
Let's say a manager that I've worked previously before, and they're well experienced, but just don't have that close relationship with them yet. So how do I create
how do you build up the relationship?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's great. So something that you can do is to let them know. It seems like, who does that? But you can let them know really directly, like, hey, I really admire the work that you're doing, and I know that I'm going to be applying to graduate school, and I'd love to keep in touch. Or you can say, would you be willing, or would you have time for to get some tea or coffee, so that I can, you can say, like, are you willing to be sort of like an informal mentor, someone that I can meet with once in a while, so that we can talk about making sure I'm taking the right classes, or applying for or seeking out the right experiences. So you can be direct, even though it seems a little bit strange. Just let them know, like, I want to be able to do this too. So, do you mind if I keep in touch with you? And most people will really enjoy it, because people who've committed their, their work to doing something on campus are usually pretty passionate about it, and they're excited for others to be interested in it too. So
Great, thank you.
yeah. Thanks for your great questions.
And I'm so sorry, I force muted someone. If you had unmuted because you wanted to ask a question, go for it. And maybe just to prompt your thinking, the attendees of the session. So Dr. Yoon, has covered what letters are, how to ask for them, who you might be asking for them, and we've covered timing as well. Are there other features of letters of recommendation that you all have any questions about?
It's good if you maybe could pause now and think to yourself, if I am applying next for a fellowship or an internship or grad school, whatever, as of now, especially if you're in like your second or third year, who would I ask for a reference? And or whose class did I really love that I've ended up declaring that as a major? Because that can tell you now to do like what Ronnie was asking about and like cultivate the relationship now so that you can stay in touch with them and let them know that that they made an impression on you, just like you're hoping that you made an impression on them. So if you could think now, I might not have someone who can write about my contributions to a research team, or I don't have someone who can talk about my research writing, or I don't have someone who can talk about like the ways that I collaborate with people on a research project, then those are things that you could maybe think about, like, okay, I'm going to need to figure out who's going to write me letters on those things, or maybe I need to start seeking out some of these experiences. And again, it really varies field to field what the expectations are when you're applying for graduate school. In the hard sciences, it's usually expected that you will have had some kind of research experience. I think it's less so in the social sciences or in the professional fields. Like my education sort of crosses between professional fields and social sciences, and so often there's more emphasis on like, what experiences have you had in the field as a practitioner versus and then that's usually more common. So as opposed to having had prior research experience or publications. So, you could ask around in terms of like what's going to best prepare you to apply to med school later, right? Or to a master's or PhD program later, or maybe you're interested in entering higher education as a student affairs administrator. Then what are some of the things that you should be getting involved in if that's what you're interested in? So it's good to ask around, like, how did people end up in their jobs? A lot of times there's a mix of like luck and chance and fate, and the path that life takes, but it's good to know different stories so that you can imagine yourself in different places in the future and what you want to chase after. I did not imagine that I would be a professor ever, so it's um, I feel like sometimes I am still asking for mentorship about certain things because I really, it's not like I was going my whole life preparing to be one, you know?
We don't have to stay the full hour. If you all are out of questions, that is totally fine. We can wrap up. I am going to share a quick slide just to end out the recording.
Okay.
And to say thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, Dr. Yoon. I've asked for lots of letters of recommendation, and I found this very helpful.
Oh, good.
Again, if you are watching, if you're in the Zoom call in real time, your attendance is already taken care of. You do not have to do anything else. I did drop the link to the education series evaluation form in the chat in case you want to give us feedback. That's always helpful. But if you're in the Zoom call in real time, that's not required. If you're watching the video later, please fill out the evaluation form for the session with your unit so that I know that you attended and I can check that off for you. Yeah, and I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing.